Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Shayna Weiss. I am the Associate Director here at the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies at Brandeis University. I am thrilled to have with us today Dr. Emmanuel Bloch. He will be speaking about Tsni'ut, modesty, between law and ideology in Israeli Orthodox communities. So just a little bit about Dr. Bloch before we get started. Dr. Bloch has a PhD in Jewish studies from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His recently completed doctoral thesis was written under the supervision of Professor Suzanne Stone, and Benjamin Brown, and it is about how and why the concept of female modesty, Tsni'ut, which was always understood as a mimetic way of life, has recently become its own legal domain. Previously, Bloch was an attorney at law at Europe. This fall, he is a research fellow at the Herbert Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. His mother language is French. He has published academic articles in 3 languages, something I aspire to. Bloch's work draws from mostly legal philosophy, but it's enriched by concepts from sociology of law and religion. And I am personally very excited to have him here today. So without further ado, Dr. Bloch.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here today at the Schusterman Center for Israeli Studies. Thank you, Professor Sana, for the invitation, Shayna for the moderation, and for the technical support. My research focuses on modern halakha. That's the one question I'm passionate about, to understand how Jewish law changes, how it develops over time, how it responds to internal factors and external challenges. And in this context, traditional female modesty, Jewish modesty, Tsni'ut, is especially interesting. Why? Because, and that's one of the key ideas of my research, for most of Jewish history, Tsni'ut was not a halachic field. Instead, Tsni'ut became a topic for halachic discussion in the second half of the 20th century. This transformation, the change in Tsni'ut, is a small revolution, and it took place in a world, Jewish orthodoxy, that sanctifies conservatism. So my objective today is to present a bird's-eye view, an overview of my whole project, which has 3 main dimensions, and then take a few minutes at the end to discuss the repercussions for Israel, and especially for orthodoxy in Israel. I have some slides to help you follow despite my slight and charming French accent. So Tsni'ut can mean different things for different people. My exclusive focus today will be on Tsni'ut as a form of modest female dress. We will not be speaking this today about the laws of forbidden seclusions, yichud, people can be together. We will not be speaking about forbidden sexual relationships, ariyot. We'll not be speaking about the separation between genders in the public sphere. Or the prohibition of listening to a female Jewish voice. All these topics are somehow connected to the concept of Tsni'ut. My attention will be only on Tsni'ut, understood as a form of female, modest female dress. In recent years, there has been a surge of academic publications on female modesty. For instance, from the perspective of gender studies, typically showing the power dynamics, how Tsni'ut can be construed as a tool of oppression against women, how the male gaze objectifies women and defines them as sexual objects, how the concept of modesty reflects patriarchal trends, and so forth. This is a very important line of research. There's a wonderful dissertation written by Dr. Tanya Regev in Israel, many articles. A different approach is presented by sociologists who have emphasized how observant women sometimes reappropriate the modesty laws for themselves, how they reject male conceptions of Tsni'ut and substitute them with their own understandings of these practices. And more approaches. All of these remarkable contributions inform my own research. My personal work focuses on the halachic aspect of Tsni'ut. And despite this somewhat narrow focus, there's a lot of ground to cover. So this presentation is meant as an overview of my research in something like 40 minutes. I left out a lot of the details. My project has 3 main dimensions. The first dimension is historical. Here, the idea is to compare Tsni'ut in the past, how it was understood in the last 18th or 19th centuries, to Tsni'ut today, how it is construed as since the 1960s, and to demonstrate thereby that modesty has become legal. Then, the realization that modesty has become a topic for halakhic debate opens the door for two kinds of interrogations. We can view Tsni'ut as an opportunity to reflect on the nature of present-day orthodoxy. That's the second dimension. And we can also view Tsni'ut as an opportunity to think about Jewish law. That's the third, the legal dimensions, which I will not present today, except in a very summarized form. It will be too long and it's a bit technical. And before we start, I would like to give a trigger warning. Some of the texts, I like this picture because it erases the male. It's a kind of poetic justice in this illustration. So some of the text we will examine and some of the developments we'll explore are a bit difficult to examine for those of us, myself included, who identify with feminism and egalitarian values. We'll be looking at texts written by male rabbis. Some of these texts describe in disturbing terms the female body and the necessity to cover it. Some of these sources may feel apologetic, perhaps offensive. This raises an interesting dilemma, the question of my positionality. I typically think that a scholar and science means that you have to take yourself out of the picture. Scholarship should be as objective and as detached as possible. I received some feedback from friends, from anthropologists and sociologists who strongly suggested that my personal voice should be heard. And one friend told me, if you do not denounce the bad guys, you're one of them. So I'm still thinking about this issue. And today I try to do both. I will take 1 second to tell you briefly about my values. I am a Jew who keeps the mitzvot, the commandments. I observe halakha. My spiritual home today is the progressive wing of Orthodoxy, which maximizes female participation in Jewish life, is very supportive of women rabbis. Feminism is very important to me. I'm also very passionate about halakha and can really get excited when I learn something new about Jewish law. And finally, I look upon Haredi Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, not as an anachronism or as a threat, but as brothers and sisters. I am interested in understanding these communities, not in exoticizing them. And for the rest of this presentation, I will invite all of us to suspend moral judgment for just a few minutes. Give me a chance to convince you that female modesty, Tsni'ut, is a fascinating topic to analyze, and that its study provides lessons about Orthodox Judaism today. Briefly, then, what can we say about the historical development of the concept of Tsni'ut? Well, we first encounter the word Tsni'ut in Talmudic and Midrashic texts. The concept is a product of Jewish creativity during the Talmudic era. Yet, in the Midrash and in the Talmud, the word Tsni'ut retains a large degree of fluidity. The word means sometimes female modesty, but just as frequently, and perhaps even more frequently, it refers to different qualities and behaviors expected from both men and women, like the proper attitude in the restroom or during sex. It is in post-Talmudic sources that Tsni'ut becomes progressively more gendered. It increasingly refers to the specifically female idea of modesty. And this trend is strengthened into modern times, even though the other meanings of the word never totally disappear. For the rabbis, female Tsni'ut was never a set of rules to be strictly followed. Do this, don't do that. Rather, it was an ideal to which women should aspire. Another critical development took place over the centuries. Legal institutions and concepts, which already existed in Talmudic times, but without any obvious connection to the idea of female modesty, became progressively pulled into the orbit of Tsni'ut. One good example of this phenomenon is head covering for married women, kisui rosh. Talmudic married women cover their hair. We have texts that prove it clearly. The failure for a wife to cover her hair justified the loss of the ketubah. But there's no reason to assume in these early texts that hair covering expressed a woman's modesty. In fact, the original institution probably meant to express the personal status of a married woman who was in the husband's domain and was protected against possible advances from other men. It is only in the writings of the Rishonim, the sages in the Middle Ages, that we find kisui rosh, head covering, understood for the first time as an expression of the married woman's personal modesty. Moving on, until the 20th century, in classical halachic sources, the notion that Jewish law regulates the dress of Jewish women is almost nowhere to be found. To be sure, traditional female Jewish dress is not a modern invention. We have paintings, we have drawings of Jewish women in different eras, different cultures, different places. We have some personal diaries. But before the 1960s, Tsni'ut was part of a mimetic way of life. It was informally passed on from mother to daughter, from neighbors and friends, at home and in the streets. It was never couched in legal language. It was never acquired textually. This changed. Until a few decades ago, no halachic authority found it necessary to write a book describing in details how Jewish observant women are expected to dress. In contrast, since the middle of the 20th century, dozens of such books were published. Quite suddenly, one discovers a large number of halachic texts that set precise guidelines regulating female dress, which areas of the body must be covered, how to cover them, the colors permitted, the colors forbidden, whether there's any difference between at home and in the street, and many more questions. These books are almost exclusively written by men in Hebrew, English, French, and Yiddish. They're often quite voluminous. I have some books here that I took with me. I can share with people in the room, and just to show what it can look like. Some of them are very thick. And I'm going to pass around to the people in the room. Please do me a favor, don't burn them. I still need them. Some here. In my personal library, I have close to 40 books dedicated to the topic, and they come from all the segments of the Orthodox world. There's at least one author, and often several authors, who has written a halachic volume on Tsni'ut. In the Hasidic world, in the yeshivish world, in the religious Zionist, right-wing, Chardali, center, left-wing, modern Orthodox people, Sfaradim. There's one volume on Tsni'ut, halachic Tsni'ut by Yemenite Rabbi. Two such legal volumes, and that's interesting, were written by women. One of them, a Hasidic Rebbe. And we are, in effect, witnesses in the span of a few short years to the creation of a new halachic corpus. New books are published almost on a yearly basis. Staying on top of these new publications is a daunting challenge, especially when new books come out, that when you're doing research. I promised myself that my next research will be on the Mishnah or on the Zohar. Anything has been stable at least half a millennium. This has been a challenge. Beyond the new halachic corpus, different manifestations of the same phenomenon exist. There's a new Beit Din, a rabbinic core that exists in Bnei Brak in Israel. It's called Mishmar HaTorah, and it only deals with questions of Tsni'ut. The new class of rabbinic experts, you know to which rabbis you should go if you have a question of Tsni'ut. The names are well known in the community. There's the surveillance of clothing shops in Bnei Brak, in other places. There's like a certificate that you get if you sell clothes, just like a restaurant has a certificate of kashrut. Certain clothing shops in certain neighborhoods can show that they only sell modest clothes and more. This is one illustration, an education manual published in Israel. It explains how a modest girl is supposed to sit, and only one girl on this picture is sitting modestly, right, on the bench. So the one on the left has her legs raised. She should not do that. One has the legs crossed. One has the legs spread. Only the girl on the far right is sitting according to Sneed. That's a book for young girls. ultimately, the real-life consequences of the halachization of Tsni'ut are not modest. In the circles influenced by this far-reaching change, it is the very texture of everyday life that is deeply, deeply negative. As a friend of mine suggested, Orthodoxy has become the society of Tsni'ut. And let us take one moment to realize that this development is not usual. If you think of Shabbat, the laws of Shabbat, well, it's the Mishnah. The same goes for blessings, Hilchot Brachot, Pilah, and all of that. Sometimes norms cease to be applied. But when did anyone see that a new section of the Shulchan Aruch was spontaneously generated? So in conclusion of this part one, I believe that a critical change took place as traditional Tsni'ut became the field that I call Dinei Malbushe Nashim, the laws of female clothing. Why? Why this change? What caused it? Well, there's one easy answer and one more complex answer. The short answer is that it's a reaction to the changes of the 1960s. At the same time, the sexual revolution, the rejection of traditional codes of sexual behavior, including dress codes, miniskirt. So the rabbis felt the need to react to this threat in the world outside of them, and there's clearly a dimension of authority and power controlling women, setting the boundaries of the community. Gender is a very, very big piece of what's happening here. The second answer is more nuanced. It requires a multidisciplinary framework that takes into account gender for sure, but also halacha, law and religious studies. Perhaps at the end of this conference, we'll come back to this, because I think that Tsni'ut stands at the crossroads of several critical social changes. And this is what makes it such a fascinating area of study. All right, so far, the historical change and what has changed the halachization of Tsni'ut. Now, to the second aspect, the religious aspect, what does the halachization of Tsni'ut teach us about Judaism today? And what does it teach us specifically about Orthodox Judaism? Let us discuss the ideology of modern Tsni'ut, or perhaps the ideology's plural form. One of the major changes in the switch from traditional, mimetic, implicit, non-textual Tsni'ut, the old paradigm, to the modern text-based, explicit Tsni'ut, the modern paradigm. What has changed is the need for explanations. In the old world, no explanation was needed. You just behaved like everyone in your community did. In the new paradigm, explanations are absolutely necessary. Why does an observant Jewish woman need to dress modestly? What does she accomplish? If she fails to do so, what harm results from her behavior? All these new questions and many more must now be addressed. So I suggest that the modern conceptualization of female modesty are like an ink blot test. They're like a window to understand the world of values to which various segments of Orthodoxy are beholden. And reading all these books that I've passed around shows that several visions of Tsni'ut have emerged. 5 discourses, 5 major discourses of Tsni'ut. I will present them briefly, each one with its main characteristics. Again, this is an overview. This is discourse number 1. It's associated mainly in my mind with Rabbi Yitzhak Isaac Nosenbaum, who was a Rabbi and more a leader without followers. He was a scholar, published books, but didn't really have like a court of Hasidim. I don't have a picture of him, which is also ironic. In his vision, the individual man, the Orthodox male, stands at the center. In his approach, a woman who observes Tsni'ut protects male onlookers from grievous sins. Women are perceived to be a source of danger for men. Human nature is lowly and materialistic, and resisting temptation is almost an impossible endeavor. So the whole point of Tsni'ut, modest clothing, is to protect the male from sinning. This is one typical quote from his book, Tsni'ut by Yeshua. Let's read the English. Each time a woman goes outside immodestly dressed, she comes back home with a bag full of sins, or many bags full of sins, God forbid. And they add up, and who knows how many millions of sins she now has, God forbid. Then she gets punished a little bit in this world, and she complains, did I really sin that much that I would be so severely punished? And she does not think of the offenses she caused to the Jewish people through her immodesty. I called this discourse the discourse on invisibility, the ideal for Rabbi Nosenbaum, and it's a discourse that you hear only in extreme communities in the ultra-Orthodox world. It's a fringe approach today. The ideal for Rabbi Nosenbaum is for a woman to stay home as much as possible. She just should not be in the public domain. That's discourse number one. The second discourse.
About half an hour left.
No. All right. This is the second discourse of, I call it a discourse of self-worth. This rabbi on the screen has become famous in the Haredi world. He's Rabbi Pesach Eliyahu Falk. He was a posek in Gateshead, he passed away maybe 2 years ago. He has written 3 volumes, one in English called Oz V'Hadar Levusha, and 2 volumes in Hebrew. Altogether, I think he has written 1,700 pages on the topic of Tsni'ut. And his books became bestsellers in the Anglo-Haredi world. When he passed away 2 years ago, Ami magazine, like an observant magazine, estimated that he sold 65,000 copies of Oz V'Hadar Levusha. I'm not sure how they got to that figure, but I don't think they took into account the French translations, the Hebrew translations, and all the secondary literature that sprung up. So it became like a very, very well-known book, oftentimes criticized because it's very, very obsessive on details, but it became like a watershed event in the Anglo-Haredi world. It became like an instant classic. And in his approach, in Rabbi Falk's approach, the Tsni'ut focuses on the female, on the individual Orthodox woman. In this approach, a woman who keeps the laws of modesty accomplishes her own divine mission in life. It's not about him, it's about her. Her task is equivalent to the imperative of Torah study for males. So males have this commandment of Talmud Torah, which is the essential mitzvah in the Haredi world, and women have this mitzvah that is Tsni'ut, that is completely equivalent in its importance to Torah study for males. Tsni'ut is not a burden. It's not a question of submitting to the will of God. There's no idea of submission. That would be a very important theme in the previous discourse. Tsni'ut is a privilege. Tsni'ut is strength. Tsni'ut is refinement, Edelkeit in Yiddish. Tsni'ut is the expression of all the good qualities that exist in a woman, and they correspond to a woman's nature, a God-defined essentialist nature. A woman who observes the laws of Tsni'ut, expresses a refined personality, she nurtures the next generation of scholars, and she brings fulfillment to herself, her family, and ultimately the world. And here too, I have one quote that I took from the book, and it's a lot of like this. So the learning of Torah and the adherence to Tsni'ut have a lot of common. They are both constant, ongoing mitzvot, which are observed in accordance with the person's appreciation of them. Just as there should be no boundary to a man's devotion to Torah, likewise, there should be no end to striving towards more Edelkeit, that's the Yiddish word for refinement, and Tsni'ut, at both an external and internal level. The more these 2 great pillars of Yiddishkeit are cherished, the better they are kept. And he goes on over like 2 or 3 pages. This is very interesting on more than one account. So on the one hand, this is like usual apologetic that says men and women are different, but complementary, they have different roles in life. It's a way to justify that women stay with a traditional like family at home and all of that, it is still interesting that Judaism traditionally has viewed women as enablers, as the people who help, like the females help the males to do their job, accomplish their women. And it says, well, women can send their husband to the Bet HaMidrash, to the house of study, and they can bring their kids to school so that they can learn. And that's how they get to the next world. That's how they get merits. In Rabbi Falk's approach, for the first time, we see that women have this kind of direct line to the divine. And that's a new development in Jewish tradition, almost never existed over like the last 18 centuries. And he goes much further than that. He says like a man's place is outside. He should go get outside the home. He should go and have a job and bring money. And this is why he has an internal mitzvah, which is Talmud Torah. Torah is the Tsni'ut, is the internal part of Judaism. Women stay inside, and as a consequence, they have an external mitzvah. And there's like a very interesting dialectic that he develops of a tension between internal and external, and how the two sexes have each one a mission that reinforces the job of the other one, and how that can create Israel and ultimately brings the Messiah, brings fulfillment to the world. It's a discourse that is influenced, I believe, by modern views like strength, all of that. I see here, I don't think Rabbi Falk has read philosophers of modernity like Arthur Comte and Feuerwerk, and that criticized religion and said that God, the more you think of God as great and big, and the more you think of man as small. Like at the beginning of modernity was a criticism of religion as diminishing man, that God as the projection of man's deficiencies. But clearly he has internalized the idea that it's good to be strong, it's good to be Oz v'hadar. Modesty is a sign of strength, of all the good qualities that you can find in a human being. So there's like an internalization of modern values in this discourse to justify a very traditional picture of family life and what a woman should be, but it's still, you see certain values seeping in. I call it this discourse of self-worth. The third discourse, this is Rabbi Shlomo Aviner. He was born in France. He is a hero in very right-wing Dati Leumi circles, who just got 14 or 15 mandates in the Knesset. He's Rosh Yeshiva in the old city of Yerushalayim. And in his approach, in his book Gan Na'ul, the center of Tsni'ut is not the individual, the male, and it's not the female. It's the nation of Israel. Modesty, Tsni'ut, is essential in maintaining the collective holiness of the Jewish people. It is a condition for re-establishing a Jewish sovereign state on the ancestral homeland. It is necessary for the Jewish people to come back and maintain a state in Israel. And in this Cookian approach, Tsni'ut becomes a step in the process of redemption and the ushering of Messianic era. Yes, quote. Purity and modesty represent the opposite of the immorality and the insolence that define the non-Jews. The qualities and attributes that of Israel are modesty, refinement, and bashfulness. It is true that modesty is defined by many norms, but these are preceded by the fundamental idea. It's like a Platonic idea of Jewish modesty. That's the opposite of non-Jewish impurity. There's this very, very deep divide that cannot be bridged between Goyim and Jews. Jews are the side of holiness. All the laws, lenient and stringent, revolve around this concept. The refinement of Israel is opposed to the insolence and coarseness of the non-Jewish insolence. I call this discourse the discourse of national holiness. So we're moving to more progressive and modern discourses. This is Rabbi Melamed. He's one generation younger. He was born 1961. He's the Rabbi of Har Bracha in Israel. He's a maverick rabbi who's very perceived to be very frum, for lack of a better word, very observant, but also very open to dialogue with non-observant movements. He had one discussion with French Reform Rabbi Delphine Horviller, and was very much attacked. So he's one of the few people who's open to discuss with all kinds of people in Israel. And so he's a central figure in religious Zionism today. Hard to classify, but let's say that he's central. And in his approach, Tsni'ut focuses not on the male, not on the female, not on the nation, but on the Jewish family. And more specifically, on the married Jewish couple. In his approach, Tsni'ut represents a tool for family happiness. Tsni'ut guarantees that love and lust, sexual desire, are channeled into the one and only legitimate expression, which is marriage. Tsni'ut is a way to make sure that all of that sexual desire, all this erotic dimension of life stays where it should be, which is the married couple. And that it makes sure that this couple stays happy, that the whole family is a happy one. Modesty is a celebration of life for Rabbi Melamed. It's a way to give a greater way to spirituality over materiality, but it's a way to balance the body and the soul. Both of them are very important in a person's life. That's a way to give a bigger space to the soul over the body. And he says, promiscuity destroys the family. Even the minor lack of Tsni'ut hurts the family. Love must be directed toward the spouse. And it's the only direction that love can be displayed in its fullness. Any attrition of love in the direction of other people comes at the expense of loves inside the home. This hurts not only the spouse, but also affects the children and their education. So if someone speaks more, it says that it's also for men, but speaks more about women, someone does not observe Tsni'ut, then he harms his own family as a result of that. This new interpretation of Tsni'ut that he puts forward is parallel for those of us who have seen that, the laws of Nida, which used to be about impurity, blood, taboo, and all of that. Today, they're understood as a Nida, the laws of like menstruation, they're understood as a way for, a tool for self-help, a tool to maintain happiness in the married couple. Sorry. That's the discourse number 4, and I'm moving to the last one, which is the most progressive discourse, and this is my favorite picture of rabbis of all times. You see 2 rabbis cooking lunch or dinner. This is Rabbi Stab, Rabbi David Stab is on the left. He is the rabbi of Shoham. He heads Sohar, and he was a candidate to the post of chief rabbi of Israel. Was not chosen, but he is a very well-known figure in progressive religious Zionist Dati Leumi, and his son, Rabbi Avraham Stab, who has a PhD from Ben Gurion University, so he has an academic education, and he's a famous in Israel on Facebook. He's one of the people you have to follow to understand what's going on. I presume that the wives are learning Daf Yomi somewhere while the rabbis are cooking dinner, so it's a very different atmosphere. This is a new discourse that they explained in a new book published 2 years ago, Avo Vetra, and they don't focus on the male, not on the female, not on the nation, not on the family. For Rabbi Stab and Rabbanim Stab, the idea of Tsni'ut is to prevent the objectification of people, and especially to prevent women from being objectified. And it's a discourse that gets a lot of ideas from modern concepts, from feminism. They have absorbed a lot of the terms and the ideas of an egalitarian social agenda. They say that Torah is fundamentally egalitarian. Tsni'ut is for men and women at the same time. They believe that Torah wants things to be hidden. Everything that's important has to remain hidden. The more important something is, a concept, a thing, the more hidden it must be, including people. says that immodesty implies that a person becomes objectified in society. Tsni'ut comes to make sure that you meet someone in the street, in society, in the office, as a subject. You don't meet someone as an object, but as a subject, you respect the person's agency and subjectivism. And in this respect, they claim that Jewish law, halakha, is more successful than feminism itself. They say that feminism and halakha have the same goal, to make sure that the humanity of the person is respected. But Jewish law is realist. They take into account the frailties of human nature, and feminism is utopist. They want to change the world completely and thereby fail to achieve the very goal that feminism sets to itself. This is a discourse that is egalitarian, wants to be an egalitarian. Again, it's only men writing about women. I'm completely aware of that. The two rabbis are the only one who consulted women. They say that before writing the book, they exchanged with different feminist activists and Orthodox women to make sure that their ideas are acceptable and reflect a certain social consensus. What happened after publication is that some of these women came forward and said that what is in the book is not what they wanted to say. So there's a lot of controversy when the book came out, but at some level, the two rabbis try to create a discourse of Tsni'ut that is egalitarian, both for men and women, and that absorbs a lot of feminist concepts and values. And that's it for the 5 discourses that I have found in all this literature. Briefly, what does this teach us? The 5 discourses, what can we say about them? There are 3 main functions of the discourse. 1, apologetics. All these discourses reinterpret practices, reinterpret sources that existed before. How to dress, what the Talmud says about something. All these discourses, each one in its own way, has to explain a lot of the past in terms of a new system of values, each discourse according to its own system: invisibility, self-worth, national holiness, family bliss, and egalitarian. It's an enormous effort to reinterpret all texts and all practices. Beyond Tsni'ut, that's the second function, each discourse of Tsni'ut embodies a conversation. It's not just the female body, and it's not just about clothing, but each one of these discourses opens up the discussion to a lot of different questions. Feminism, the difference between Jews and Gentiles, the place of a family, the place of law. This is why I suggested that Tsni'ut is a window. It's a window into the world of Orthodox people. Different worlds of Orthodox people, because different Orthodox communities don't see the world in the same way. It's very important in communities that don't write books to explain how they think. We have to find ways resources to tap into to understand. We have to reconstitute how these communities see the world. You can do it in different ways. You can talk to people, see what they think about a certain topic. My claim is that you can take the texts and use them as a venue to research the values and the ideas and the concept held dear in that segment of the observant world. And finally, I won't get into this today. In each of the 5 discourses, there's like a complex dynamics between halakha, the law, and meta halakha, vision and the values. All these values are expressed in terms of normative content. Certain norms change from one discourse to the next one, and it's quite obvious that you can trace it back to the outlook, the world, the view of the world that the rabbi held. So in the ultra-Orthodoxy, we have these 2 discourses of invisibility and self-worth. And there's a difference, for instance, whether Tsni'ut is applicable at home. If a woman stays home, is not in the street, is not in the public domain. The first discourse says, well, then give us room to relax. You're not a danger to anyone. You can just take it easy. According to Rabbi Falk, who says that Tsni'ut is the self-worth of the woman, that is the expression of her refinement. It makes no difference whether you're outside or inside. You just want to express your own character inside your home, just like on the street. And so you can find consequences to these meta-halachic visions. I find this very fascinating to research. That concludes the second dimension. 10 minutes. Okay. Very briefly, the legal side, I will not discuss this today. That's the third aspect of my work. I suggest that Tsni'ut, becoming halachic, tells us something about the nature of 20th century halakha. How does a law emerge from non-law? There was nothing 60 years ago, almost nothing 60 years ago. Today we have huge volumes saying this is asur, prohibited, this is mutar, you can do. How do you create new norms? There's no parliament, there's no chambers. This is all rabbis writing and books accepted by the community. How does law happen? Are there any strategies to generate new norms? Some that are more successful, some less successful. How do you do that? Complex dynamics of continuity and change. Does it make a difference that halakha, Jewish law, is self-understood as divinely revealed, like the Sharia, for instance, but unlike modern American law? It's understood as coming from God. How does that play a role in the change and the continuous adaptation of halakha to new situations, new challenges? All of that is about Jewish law in the 20th century, maybe for another time, I hope. And before we conclude, since we want to talk about Israel, what does this all tell us about Israel today, and especially about Orthodoxy in Israel today? I have some suggestions, and I think we can continue. I don't think I have a whole picture. I think it's a conversation that we can have. We had these 5 discourses of Tsni'ut, and if we go back to them, some of them are from Israel and some of them from the diaspora. Actually, most of them are from Israel. Rabbi Stav and Rabbi Stav are Israeli rabbis, Rabbi Melamed as well. Rabbi Aviner was from France, but he's a hero in religious science circles. So at least the 3 discourses, 3 to 5, are clearly from Israel. Rabbi Falk, self-worth, was a British rabbi, passed away. And I think it's clearly a discourse that emerged in the diaspora. Rabbi Nosenbaum is, well, I think it's more complex. He lived in Brooklyn and then in Bnei Brak, but I'm not sure if you can easily classify him as Israel or diaspora. There's a certain feel of an old world to his approach. It's like a certain medieval quality to his discourse. It feels something he could have been written in the 15th century, I don't know when. So I'm not sure you can qualify the discourse of invisibility as an Israeli discourse. This means that we have 3 discourses from Israel and 1 from the diaspora. And clearly there's a certain creativity that is taking place in Israel. So far, I have failed to see the same creativity in North America or in Israel, or in the UK or in France. There's a new book coming out soon, so that may change the situation. But at the moment, there's a certain audacity in Israel in grappling with contemporary questions, perhaps a sense of urgency as well. That these questions of the place of men and women, the place of law in society, these discussions must be discussed, must be addressed. There's a certain kind of new religious thinking that's taking place in Israel, and I just don't see it. It's only one data point. I'm not taking any conclusions, but in terms of Tsni'ut, you don't see exactly the same kind of new approaches outside of Israel. It's not just in terms of number, it's also in terms of kind of questions that are addressed. If you check carefully in the diaspora, the questions are mainly related to the individual. Rabbi Falk discusses the individual woman, the female Orthodox woman. what she has to do, what it means for her. Rabbi Nosenbaum, if we think that he represents something like more traditional, it's also about the male, the individual male. In contrast, Rabbi Aviner is interested in the nation, the Jewish people, as this esoteric, mystical concept of the Jewish nation. Rabbi Melamed is interested in the family as the building block of Israeli society. And Rabbi Stab and his son, Rabbi Stab and Rabbi Stab, they are interested in, well, Israeli society, or at least like community. How can we have a community in which women don't become objectified? So the collective dimension of Tsni'ut is much more emphasized in Israel, and the individual aspect of Tsni'ut is much more emphasized outside of Israel. This is perhaps unsurprising. I still think it is significant. Finally, one last, perhaps the most interesting aspect is specific to ultra-Orthodoxy. As we have seen, we have two discourses of Tsni'ut in the Haredi camp, invisibility and self-worth. Now, the extremist wing of Orthodoxy, Rabbi Nosenbaum and the people who came after him, are engaging today, for the last 20 or 25 years, in polemics against the more moderate camp, Rabbi Falk. Every author, every person who writes on self-worth and Tsni'ut being the inner value of a woman is attacked. Every book is criticized, vilified, delegitimized. This is one example of a pashkevil, like a Zdehirut Reformim. I'm not sure if you can see on your screen. It says, be careful, Reform Jews. Oz V'Hadar Lebusha, this book that we have here, the 700-page book on Tsni'ut. This is a book that comes from modern circles, from Reform Jews. So just to remind you, this is Reform Rabbi. This is obviously there's a certain resemblance to Geiger or so every book that it comes from outside of Israel is attacked, is criticized in very, very strong terms. Why? I think, I can't prove it, but I think that the extremist camp views the more modern diaspora discourse as a threat and wants to react against something coming from the outside, wants to delegitimize it. It's a reaction to modern values seeping into very right-wing communities in Israel, in Mea Shearim, in some of these places. And I do think it explains a lot of what's going on in Israeli ultra-Orthodox, in Haredi world. If you think, some of us are probably aware that there's a phenomenon of suppressing female pictures in Orthodox medias, in anywhere, in the observant world in Israel, in the Haredi world in Israel, you just don't see women anymore in media, in anything. It's something that is very puzzling, and puzzling for people who are active, like observant journalists in the world. They don't understand why. It happens in the last 20 or 25 years. There's some scholarship on that. I suggest that this new phenomenon is a reaction to Rabbi Falk, to this discourse becoming more prominent in Israel. And as a result, the more extremist wings become emboldened, they become embattled, they fight back. And I think this new phenomenon that happens only over the last 20 years of suppressing the representation of a female body, I think it's a reflection of Judaism being a battlefield of ideas, and certain ideas gaining traction over other ideas. That's what I believe. And that's it for today. So I conclude with a final insight. I think that in the rich landscape of early 21st century, Tsni'ut is at the very center of critical social phenomena. One could be puzzled by the intensity and seriousness of a discussion of the length of a skirt, of the degree of opaqueness of the blouse, one could be tempted to dismiss such a discussion as futile or to interpret it as a sign that religion fosters so small-minded fundamentalism. But I think that Tsni'ut is at the very center of a triple story. It presents patterns of accommodation, penetration, rejection of feminism and modern values in orthodoxy. Second, it exemplifies how Jewish law, halakha, becomes a shield, preventing tradition from becoming eroded by outside influences. And third, it instantiates the struggle of religious societies to redefine their own identity while maintaining a facade of continuity. All these stories intersect in Tsni'ut, and many of these questions are not resolved, and the story of Tsni'ut, as it will be written in future decades, will be fascinating to observe. It's bound closely with the story of Jewish Orthodoxy itself. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Sarna. I'm the director of the Schusterman Center. And now we have, dare I say it, a modest amount of time for questions. Because of the technology, we'll take a certain number of questions from people here in the room, giving preference to students, but then to everyone. And then I will turn it over to Rima Farah and say congratulations. She will be defending her dissertation later this month. I'll turn it over to Rima, who has been monitoring what is really a large number of questions from people in the audience, really a tribute to how much interest and excitement your talk has generated. But first, questions from people here in the room. We have several people here who have expertise in this subject. Please, and start by identifying yourself. Lisa.
I'm Lisa Joffe from the Hadassah Rabbis Institute here. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I have two questions. One, can you talk a bit about the audience for these books? Who reads them? Are they taught in schools? Do people read them as literature? Do they buy them and just put them on the shelf to show people that they've read about, but they don't? And do people follow these rules, or do they just engage? So that's question number one. And question number two, could you say a bit about this new Beit Din and the kind of questions or disputes that come before it? Right.
Yes. Thank you so much. These are very good questions. So for your first question, what happens in, the societies, in the communities, each discourse, each must be researched by itself. Rabbi Rosenbaum was a very lonely figure. He was like sitting in his own Bet Midrash in Bnei Brak for years, publishing pamphlets that became a book. I don't think anyone is paying attention to him until this became a thing. And then one generation later, people rediscovered his book, which is also very hard to read. It's very technical, and it's not something you can easily sell to regular people. And then it's like a new enterprise to vulgarize his writings. I found pamphlets making his ideas more accessible in really Dati Leumi synagogues in Katamon, in Jerusalem. It's becoming, I don't know how much traction it gets outside very, very right-wing circles. There's a website called Keter Tsni'ut, the crown of Tsni'ut, where I think it's very interesting. There's like one woman, Rabbi Zaidner, who answers questions. She has part of the website is called Shtut HaTzniut, Response of Tsni'ut, and she serves as a posek, a female Rebbitzin answering questions of halakha on one topic only, not on anything else, but it's still interesting. Rabbi Falk is the object of much love and much hate. I think it's hard to exaggerate the importance that he took in the Anglo-Haredi world. And then each book is different, even in the way it's presented. So Rabbi Stab and Rabbi Stab's book feels very academic. It quotes from Freud and Lacan and modern thinkers. It's addressed to an audience that is educated in the academy, has degrees for sure. I doubt that someone like in a religious Zionist who went to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem will just take the book and say, oh, this is how I'm going to behave. I don't think they even believe that themselves. I still think they wanted to go for the exercise, but I'm not sure they expect people to follow them. So each book has its own audience and each book has its own dynamic. And clearly, women and people can do something else than what is described in the book, and have different ideas. Sociologists, anthropologists, Ayala Fader from Fordham University went to interview women in Brooklyn from Steve Bobover, and she found examples from the first two discourses. So you find mixes. Reality is always more complex than what's in the book, but I still really believe that there's a value to taking these discourses as archetypes and using them to map the world, the orthodoxy. Your second question, the debating, I don't know much. There's a takanot, like set of rules that they have published. So I do have something. I have a video. I don't know who recorded that, but I have a video of the Dayanim, the judges, who went to see Rabbi Eliashib, who was like the sage, was 102 years old and was the leader of the Haredi world in Israel. And they came to him with questions, say, what is the function of this new Beit Din? What are we doing here? And so I have like 7 or 8 minutes of that, of exchange, but I don't know what the Beit Din does today. And I have 1 or 2 friends in Bnei Brak. No one knows. I doubt someone buys a skirt in a shop and says, oh, I'm not sure this is long enough, and then runs to the Beit Din. I don't think that's happening. I don't know. It's a mystery. There's no Beit Din to discuss questions of kashrut, Shabbat, or anything. Like this one topic Beit Din is unique to my knowledge, to Tsni'ut. It's strange.
Other questions in the room?
Yeah, so I was thumbing through Oz V'Hajar, and I noticed a small note that for Oriental women, quote unquote, right, they are accustomed to wearing brighter colors that, our Ashkenazi sisters, I'm paraphrasing, right, it might not be appropriate for them, but it's okay for the quote unquote Oriental women. So my question is there a Mizrahi Ashkenazi divide in these books? Or you want to call it Sephardi, right? How does that reveal how does that sort of reveal itself?
Right. So you could also have noted that all these rabbis are all Ashkenazi.
Right.
Yeah. I have not, there's a lot of books written by Sephardi rabbis. Mm-hmm. I have not found one book that presents this system of Tsni'ut, kind of discourses. But one woman, the wife of a rabbi in France, has translated Od V'Hadar Lebusha. Her name is Rabbanit Sarah Haggai. She's the head of a seminar for girls in Beit Vegan. And the result in French is not exactly like the original. It's a lot of personal input, and you can see the difference. So there's a different study sensitivity. It's hard to trace exactly, but it's clearly, so it's also hard to know if it's different because she's a woman, because she's Moroccan, or because she's just herself as a person. So I don't know exactly how to say, but clearly, Rabbi Falk, when he says that, when Rabbi Falk says that a woman who dresses modestly is beautiful and strong, he has in mind like a lady in Gateshead who's not fashioned by any stretch of imagination. She's not fashionable. Rabbanit Haggai is addressing French girls. Most of them are from North African descent. And she has a lot of talk of how it's normal and good for a woman to be attractive and to be beautiful. And there's a certain validation of materiality in her book that you don't find in Rabbi Falk. It's like he's paying some kind of lip service to where it's nice to be beautiful. He doesn't believe it. She does. So there's a difference. And she's very troubled by this idea that my grandmother in Morocco used to dress in this very bright colors. And I'm saying in my book that every bright color is sexy and too attractive, and you can't wear that. She has like 2 pages of long discussions of which color is too attractive, which is not, whether pink is okay, whether and she's bothered by the fact I discuss against family tradition. She tries to navigate between these two. So there's a slight sensitivity. There's also a long tradition in certain communities that live in Muslim countries that women just have a veil, just you don't see the faces.
That was another question I had, but didn't ask.
Yeah, in Yemenite circles, that's very strong. There's Rabbi Ritzabi in Bnei Brak says that it's a modest woman should just see the face. So that's also something you don't see in Ashkenazi circles.
So we're going to switch now to the questions of the audience. I want you to know there are many, many, and since you are Kamayan Hamitgaber on this subject, maybe we can try and have short answers to get to as many questions as possible.
Yes,
Please.
thank you very much. I am Rima Farah. I'm a doctoral student at the Department of Near Eastern and Judaic Studies at Brandeis. And thank you very much for your talk. And we have some questions, interesting questions from the audience. And, you know, one of the questions is about what made the shift in the mid-20th century. You touched on that, of course, but I would like to elaborate a little bit on that and on that question, because like you think during that time, there was, you know, the feminism, and after the second wave of feminism, and then we were in the 1960s and 1970s, and it impacted also women in Israel. And you could find also magazines like Ha'isha, different magazines that presented the woman differently. So do you think that that shift took place during that time in reaction, in response to not only theories of feminism, but also what was happening and what was changing in the status of women, how they were presented in Israel?
Yeah, for sure, there's a huge aspect that is a reaction to the Western world changing drastically. But that's not the only aspect. Like the halachization, the legalization of Tsni'ut began before the 1960s, just very slowly and sporadically. The first book that I could find is not a book, it's like 5 pages by Chafetz Chaim, a rabbi in Eastern Europe. He has like a book called Gedei Olam. It's really 5 pages. In Baghdad, a sage called the Ben Ish Chai published a book in Arabic called Dinei Nashim. I don't know how to say in Arabic, the norms of women. He discusses Tsni'ut, how women are expected to dress. And in 1931 or 32, there's a book by Rabbi Didovsky, also someone I just couldn't find anything about his biography. He lived in the old Yishuv, in the old world in Yerushalayim, and he has a real book of norms and sources, Tsni'ut, how one expected to dress. So something happens before the 1960s. My claim is that halacha changes in modernity. That the function of halacha is becoming, halacha is this tool to protect the identity of the Jewish community. Like all the mechanism of social control were failing. Modernity was threatening to engulf and tradition was threatened. And halacha takes this new function as a shield. There's a wide phenomenon of halachization of different areas of Jewish tradition that were never halachic. It's not just Tsni'ut, it's other faces. So these two phenomena intersect.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, you see all of a sudden many, many more books on halachic Tsni'ut. So for sure, the changes in the West accelerated a lot.
It started before, yeah.
It started very slowly, and I think Tsni'ut has become this way to make sense of the world, like create a story of what we believe.
Yeah. How about the challenges, like you know, challenges of the people who do not identify, non-binary or gay communities. So our audience is interested to know how is this? Is like there's a double challenge here. You can call it, or I will add to this too, like with non-Jews in general. Not that I assume that non-Jews only are the ones that only identify with these, but like we'll talk about other challenges that added to what already exists. Do you think this made this even more?
These are such big questions, and I'm so happy you were raising them. It's very hard to discuss in 2 minutes of gay and lesbians in Orthodoxy. It's not easy to be non-binary in an Orthodox community. There's some So one of the most interesting books I've read recently is by Orthodox Rabbi, who's a student of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Some of us may know him, who's written a book on the laws of transgenderism. So if someone has changed from male to female, female to male, well, what laws apply? If someone has become a woman, does Tsni'ut apply? If someone has become a male, is there an obligation to pray 3 times a day, to wear a kippah, to put on a tefillin, and all of that? There's one rabbi who deals with that. I think it's still a question that is happening today. Yeah. It's hard to say something with so little distance.
It's relatively new, right?
It's very new. Yeah. I'm afraid in most places, if you go to a rabbi and say that you're attracted to the same sex, they're just going to tell you that you just need to go through conversion therapy. And so it's a huge issue. It's still very, it's an enormous problem, but it's changing as well. Yes. Jews and non-Jews, what I think interesting is that the same phenomenon happened in the Muslim world as well.
Yes, exactly. That was the next interesting thing.
And in some Christian communities, I have to draw the line somewhere, because I'm using sociology and anthropology and legal scholarship and a lot of, I don't study the Muslim world, so someone else will have to do it.
Like they were interested, like the interest is not to kind of talk about details about what's happening in the Muslim world, but it's interesting to put this in a wider, perspective and see other phenomena, because what you have talked about now, it's just like the same thing that happens also in the Islamic culture about the hijab and the scarf. And today there's a really sharp discussion about whether it's a religious requirement or it's just a social habit. Right. I mean, it's not necessary. And the same ideas about what is Tsni'ut in women. So I'm just referring also to our audience who also were interested to know whether there is a discussion around how it fits in that, wider phenomena about what's happening also in Islam or in other cultures.
There are connections for sure.
Yeah.
I did not research that. Someone maybe here can address that. It's obvious, like there's a sect in Beit Shemesh of women who dress completely well, right, and that clearly is some kind of influence from the Muslim world. It does not happen anywhere besides in Israel. So some kind of cross-fertilization of ideas.
Was this also in the context of more of the Ashkenazi culture? Because some audience are saying that the Sephardic, how is it really manifested or hasn't been discussed or talked about in different?
It started in different places at the same time.
Okay.
But mostly in right-wing circles. And then the more moderate people, if you notice, came 1 generation or 2 generations later. Once Tsni'ut became halachic, then more moderate and progressive wings of Orthodoxy gave new interpretations. But the translation of this mimetic tradition into a halachic rule-based discourse happens in Hasidic and Yeshivish and very right-wing Dati-Leumi circles. It's hard to say. It's not one starting point only. There are several starting points to this phenomenon.
There were any publications on that and like criticism, like there were all the newspapers affiliated to religious bodies in Israel. How was all this received? What was the reaction to and the responses to this? Because you come up with books and laws and then you say, okay, like is it really accepted among these?
It's not much. In private, some rabbis tell me this is crazy. This is just nuts. There's no reason that we talk about the female body all the time. But they're very scared of saying that in public. Rabbi Henkin, who's American rabbi in Israel, published a book to criticize Rabbi Falk. Yes, that's a French translation. His book is called Understanding Tsni'ut. So he presents a more moderate vision. He says this Rabbi Falk is way too obsessive, way too extreme. But from my perspective, what he does is present a different halachic version of Tsni'ut. No one says...
Not necessarily opposing one, but...
Right. There are very, very few people will say, well, Tsni'ut is a traditional value. We have many traditional values. You have to be generous. No one says, well, these are the norms of generosity. You're supposed to give that much money. Like being patient is a value. You have a lot of Musa ethics in Judaism. Tsni'ut used to be something like, it was a value. I have not seen anyone saying we should keep it as a value. I don't know. So this idea that halacha says something about Jewish clothing somehow is not disputed.
Not disputed, okay. Yeah, so well, what's the kind of the level, it says, what is the level of like the balance between of these laws between what you stated as the protection of women from possible sins, and at the same time, the limiting the woman from distracting the men from the Torah. How do the laws create kind of a balance between the two of protecting the woman, the more women are modest and the more they are not going to be sinful, and at the same time not distracting the men from becoming tempted. So do you think, what's the balance here? Does the law create is it rigid or does it have any flexibility?
So I think this question mixes the two first discourses together. The first discourse is just about the man, and it says that women should just be invisible. And the least you see women, the better the world is. There's no balance at all. Yeah. It's very extreme. The second discourse, Rabbi Falk, is about women. I'm sure if you go and talk to people, men and women in these communities, you would find people. That's what sociologists do. Professor Fada does that. So like a British scholar, Dr. Leah Tarajin-Zeller, goes to talk to these women and see how they negotiate the boundaries between all these requirements. I am a scholar of text. I study text, so I don't see how people navigate these boundaries, but it's a different part of scholarship that addresses that. And it's been researched, and I'm sure there's more to do.
Okay, women today, Haredi women on the social media, like today you can see blogs and Facebook and women, how the way and makeup and all, and they try to promote these kind of, the beauty of women and the physical appearance. And how is this, these laws are reflecting on, are there any kind of, contradictions?
If you believe like Rabbi Falk, then beauty is Tsni'ut. There's no contradiction between beauty and Tsni'ut in the second discourse. I think the biggest Facebook group in French for Jews is called Let's keep Tsni'ut and be fashionable. It's got more like 15,000 members, only women. I tried to get it. I was refused. I had to send my wife as my spy. It's not interesting. It's it's all how to dress, how to present, all that. You want to be attractive, respectable, and still keep all these norms.
So it's still possible in the eyes of this, in this, according to this law, it's possible.
That's, I think, is the discourse that is gaining traction in the Haredi world. It's become dominant, and it's threatening the extremists.
It is definitely today. I see. Okay.
All right. There's much more to say on this subject. I know that everyone, those in the room and those on Zoom, join me in thanking Dr. Emmanuel Bloch for this really remarkable and fascinating presentation. I hope that you will join us again on November the 17th, when our Schusterman Center visiting scholar, Dr. Talia Diskin, will be speaking on the law and the child, legal and moral discourse in children's weeklies in Israel's first decade. Thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful day.